cautiously, meeting with the 11-member communities. We've been 12, the select boards and town councils. We're now meeting with different resident groups, coffee hours, library events, on the cable shows, and Medfield scheduled for next week. And radio, whatever we can do to get the information out to the residents about the vote. So, it's difficult when we don't have one, I used to be at Southeastern and we had the Brockton Enterprise and it covered all of the towns. So you could get word out a lot easier than we can. It's proving difficult to be able to find a mass to be able to inform people, but we're doing what we can.
We will have the booth at Medfield Day to answer any questions we might have, any of the residents. It's important we get the word out. And I feel it's important to, vocational training is important.
100%.
And if we didn't do anything with this school, we came up with an estimate of like $160 million over the next 10 years that would have to be spent, which is just crazy, and that would not be reimbursable. So I'm looking at it as a two-pronged approach. One is to back vocational training and also back the school itself and the need for a new building. When this building originally was built, it didn't cost any of the towns anything. The state paid 100%. So when you think in the long run, over 50 years, all of the towns have done pretty well just to pay the operating budget of the schools, and they didn't have to pay for the original build. So it's important. It's important to all of us, I think.
Eileen, questions,
So I just want
comments?
to clarify, Karen, all you have to do is all 11 towns just win by one vote.
That's right.
Okay.
Right,
Right,
so
that's
if you
good.
picture them all together as one great big town,
Okay,
it's,
good.
it's by one vote, one way or the other, yeah.
And it's taking place on October 24th, the regular voting hours or modified?
Yeah, so this is, this falls under the chapter 70, section 16N. The state law actually dictates the length of the vote. So where most towns are statewide, it's 12 hours.
Yeah.
This states clearly that it's between 4 and 8 hours.
I mean, you said it, it caught my attention. I'm like, wait a minute, you said noon to
Yeah.
6 or something?
Noon to 8, right?
Noon to
So
8,
each
okay.
of the town clerks opted obviously for the longer, so it's 8 hours, noon to 8.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's going to be key for Medfield Day, to just make sure that people understand, because so many people vote early on their way to work, and we want to get people behind this, because I agree with what you just said. I mean, especially with what's going on in the world of solar and electric cars and all these things, we need the skill set, and to know that, we're lucky enough to be in a town that has the ability to send kids to a school, especially with the new facilities, so I think it's fantastic.
Well, we're available to do, again, a coffee hour too, if someone, wanted to reach out to us for that, that's fine, or in the evening one, or the elderly, the senior centers, we have a few of those scheduled throughout the
Good.
district, so, anything that we can do to help get the word out.
Our school building website has all the information in this transparent process. That's try-countybuilding.com.
Okay.
You get lost in it, it's videos, it's all kinds of
Oh,
things.
yeah, it's a great video. Right on the front
Well, we
page.
got a few more meetings, which is good too. So the week before the vote, I'm sure we'll bring it up again and remind, because people do watch this recording. They may not be watching it live right now, but because it's on YouTube, so it is important.
Okay, perfect, thank you. Well, we appreciate the opportunity, thank you for reaching
All
out to
set?
us.
Yep, thank you.
Thanks for coming back.
Oh, so I was just going to say, thank you for coming, and I agree with Gus that it's a very important project, so that we need to, it's a very important school. And I just will express my surprise that I have discovered that 50-year-old buildings need to get replaced. That was sort of one of the surprises to me as a select board member, that, I mean, we had to replace a public safety building from the 70s. We're sitting here in a building that's 150 years old, but it had a pretty substantial renovation several times.
Yeah, so the unique piece with the vocational schools, it's used all day into the night, right? We have adult training programs at night, high school student programs during the day. And the wear and tear is significant. It's 50 years old, but it's 100 years of use, if you think of it that way.
Well, good luck with it. Thank
Well,
you for coming.
Thank you.
Thanks for
Thank you very
coming.
much.
So our next appointment is with Penny Connor, Medfield Energy Committee Chair. Review of the Medfield Energy Committee Charter and the appointment of the people, reappointment of people to the committee. Thanks for coming, Penny.
Thank you. It's an honor to be here. So, Energy Committee since 2008. I was one of the original appointees to the Medfield Energy Committee. And we find ourselves at the committee really at a transition point. I have been a member now for a long time. As I was voted in as chair in August, I launched a listening tour. I met with everybody on our committee. I met with advocates in the community, and I met with local town leaders to hear their thoughts about how we could be a better support of the town and their observations. And so today I'd like to give you some feedback about what I heard, and then how our committee has recommended we take action on that. So first and foremost, out of the 15 interviews conducted, there was a recognition that MEC has passionate and knowledgeable leaders. We do have a presentation, I don't know if they can pull it up, but it was included in your materials.
Yes.
That there is a need to clarify the MEC charter, that we need to develop plans for the town buildings to achieve our 2050 goals, which are around carbon reduction, establish MEC as a valued partner to the town, and streamline the administrative processes or aspects of MEC. And I gave a couple of examples here about the expertise and leadership, both from the town leader. In general, you have deep expertise in the membership, and a MEC member said we have strengthened the MEC team. I will go into a little more detail with some highlights, not every comment, but around the need to clarify the charter, let me just give you some examples of some comments that I heard. I heard that we lost our focus. I feel a responsibility to help the town on energy matters for the town's assets. Anything we can do to educate the public, to help them make decisions on their own accord, is an important part of the role. Provide the public the best way to saving money by showing them things they can do at their home. We need to be mindful of what the town can afford. The cost aspects of the investments are legitimate issues that need to be addressed. Defining the guardrails for MEC and investments is a good idea. So that was the feedback on clarifying the charter. On developing a plan for town buildings to achieve 2050 goals, this was a question that I asked on the listening tour of, would it be helpful if we had a plan for how we transition to these goals of greenhouse gas reductions, net zero by 2050, and achieving savings. And that's one more slide, perfect. That here I heard help the town save money by having a focus on the town's buildings. It would be useful to have a playbook for each building the town would be able to use for operations, maintenance, and capital planning. Ensure that we are doing as much as we can with the equipment we have in our town buildings. The top priority is the town's buildings. So a lot of cohesion around our primary focus is for the town's buildings, and how we can help the town achieve that. And then on making us a valued partner, there was a strong sentiment that make the Energy Committee a valued partner to the town. Ensure town committees know to contact us for advice. Be collaborative with town leaders. So that's what came out of the listening tour. So out of that, at our September meeting, I shared the feedback from the listening tour. I had prepared some ideas about the charter, which was written in 2008, has only had one edition in 2022 with an additional add to address the Medfield Climate Action Plan. And I suggested that perhaps we needed to add some additional language to you. So if you'll move 2 slides forward, I have, the next slide is just the town charter as it is, and then I have made suggested edits, and I will walk through these. The red is the suggested edits. I've highlighted some things that I think are particularly important, and the black strikeouts are language that has been taken out. So one of those is just administrivia, changing the board of selectmen to the select board. We can move it up to 2023 now. So the select board appointed the energy committee to look first and foremost at the town's energy use. That was always in there, and it continues to stay in there. And I think that's an important point, first and foremost at the town's energy use. And I added, and greenhouse gas emissions, and develop recommendations to achieve energy savings, reduce greenhouse gas emissions, and are cost-effective over the life of the investment, thereby positioning the town to achieve its energy and greenhouse gas objectives by 2050, as outlined in the town's warrant article 22, that was passed in 2021. So that's an important first sentence. It really states, it's the thesis, right? It states what we are trying to do, that our focus is on the town buildings. And I've added in greenhouse gas reductions because the town did adopt that we would achieve net zero by 2050. And then we've added in language that provides some criteria because it's going to be important for us to prioritize the investments. So how do we do that? And the suggestion is that these investments need to create energy savings, reduce greenhouse gas emissions, and are cost-effective over the life of the investment. Additionally, secondly, provide education and outreach and education to the town's residents and businesses that could save energy and GHG emissions. I deleted some of this other stuff because I thought it was superfluous, but just to clean it up a little bit. And then importantly, the select board asked the committee to look at the following areas, and these are the bullets. And the committee has suggested adding some bullets. And this, by the way, was reviewed and approved by the committee.
I watched your meeting the other night, so yeah.
Thank you very much. So, we've already done the baseline for measuring energy reduction, so I took that out. It's done. But we do need to measure energy and GHG emissions reductions progress for the town's buildings and fleet. I'm envisioning a dashboard at some point that we could monitor. Develop long-range plans for town-owned buildings and transportation to achieve energy and carbon objectives by 2050. Now, I will note this does add transportation. That's a part of the town's properties that you have fleets, and as we look forward in time, I know there's going to be increasing requests to move those fleets towards electrification. So we would posit that we would assist with, it's all energy, and that we would be developing those long-range plans. Provide energy efficiency and GHG reduction recommendations for town buildings, fleet, and transportation. Reduce energy consumption through retrofitting existing buildings, equipment, vehicles, processes. That was from the original. Design or purchase energy efficient buildings, equipment, vehicles, processes. The next one I took out, or next one we took out, but expanded to say, recommend alternative energy resources to support goals and increase energy resiliency. That is a new term that we've introduced. As we look at the effects of climate change, we are seeing an increased frequency and strengthening of events that I know the town has to prepare for, certainly company I work for prepares for, and there may be solutions such as combining renewables with batteries that allow us to have additional resiliency that we would want to consider. I changed public relations to provide outreach and education to town's residents and businesses on ways to save energy and GHG emissions. Then we have the same was advise and support the town's implementation of the town's of Medfield's climate action plan and develop long-range, that's a duplicate, so we can take that out, sorry about that. And then this last paragraph was in number 4, so I left it in. So those are the changes. The final slide just does that in a clean copy if you want me to review that. And I've just highlighted there, to me, what the core is, the thesis, the main point is really highlighted in this first sentence around the priority. And then you describe it more. So that is the charter. I welcome your questions or feedback or edits, because at the end of the day, we serve, this charter is created by the town. This is, you have created this committee to support the town.
We appreciate your input on our charter. Gus, do you want to start?
First, Penny, thanks for stepping up to be the chair of the committee. I appreciate that. I've thought for some time that it's valuable to have some, given what Eversource as a company does in terms of this whole area, I've always thought for a long time just being on the committee was very valuable to have somebody who's actually in Eversource who's helping our town do this, so I appreciate you did that. I do have edits or comments, and I'm not sure. Let me start with questions. It was just curious. I had to go back to the article to be sure I remembered what the article actually said, and it did say that we were talking about reducing greenhouse gases, and what it is since that passed, so much of the conversations almost everywhere, not just here in town, is around net zero carbon. And in my head, I had literally misremembered, and it was only carbon. So when it showed up as greenhouse gases, I said, well, that's right, let me check, and that's what the article says. So here's my question. Is the challenge that we have as a town around this only carbon? Or are we really talking greenhouse gases in the way that I would have thought thought of greenhouse gases even 10 or 15 years ago? Ozone, some of the CFCs, all sorts of stuff. Are we literally going to be tackling the full, what for me is environmentally fuller issue in greenhouse gases?
The Town of Medfield Climate Action Plan is a more holistic approach that looks at how do we create, addressing our buildings and our transportation, to really create solutions that achieve that net zero by 2050 goal. But I agree, it is more wholesome, and that the Climate Action Plan actually goes beyond and thinks about creating, one of the aspects I would say is on this edge is creating more walkable cities, right? And a walkable town where you could encourage folks to not necessarily drive. And so, so it is inclusive of that, if that answers your question.
Yeah, that's good. It sounded like it was a change in a good direction from my viewpoint, because it was broader, it looks at the environment, not just at one particular thing. So I like that.
Okay.
I have some, I'm not even gonna bother going through the wordsmithing edits, because I'm not sure if I probably have to share them with the two of you, and have a reputation of both using red pen and having more comments, so it's not as bad as it looks, it's just their edits. I'll hit you with one edit. The second one, develop long-range plans for town-owned buildings and transportation to achieve energy and greenhouse gas objectives, as opposed to carbon.
I should say greenhouse gas.
Okay.
Because that was, the committee asked me to do their edits, I was supposed to change all those.
Okay. Well, that's all right, I'm good at this.
Good,
As long as
thank
my
you.
red pen doesn't run out,
I'm
I'm
honored
good
you
at this.
put that much time and are doing, this is important, and I appreciate your time.
So, and then the fifth bullet, which is design or purchase of energy efficient buildings, equipment, vehicles, or processes. When I read that, my first thought was there should be a verb in front of that. And what I'm really saying is, I don't think the Energy Committee is going to be designing energy efficient buildings. So I was saying, should it be encourage the design or purchase of energy, explore the design, advise on the design, as opposed to literally designing? That just didn't sound, sounded a little too hands-on and direct.
I agree, that was in the original charter.
So I'm not arguing with what you tell me what you want to do, I just don't think you want to be designers.
I think you're
Okay.
exactly right.
Okay.
It needs to be another verb, or you could, I questioned whether it was duplicative of, is it subsumed in, we're providing energy efficiency and GHG reduction recommendations for the town's buildings, fleet, and transportation. I almost thought about taking it out, because it's almost duplicative. To
Right.
streamline it.
Anyway, one way or the other, I'll
perfect.
get a copy of this to you, or
Thanks.
for you guys first, maybe, so you can decide whether you agree with anything I'm saying here. On the last bullet, after you got rid of the duplicate, because I did catch that, but the advise on and support the town's implementation of the Town of Medfield Climate Action Plan. This is really a comment to the three of us. Last meeting that we had, when we were talking about Christine's goals, we got into a discussion around what role Christine needed to play around achieving or ensuring the achievement of the Climate Action Plan. Personally, I don't think, and Pete, I'm guessing you disagree on this, but personally, I don't think that's a good idea, because basically what we have is a Climate Action Plan, which is a complex, to actually do it is a complex task, so to simply put it in a paper bag and put it on Christine's desk and go make it so number one, is probably not gonna, I don't think that's a good path. So the fact that this is still in here, I'm glad to see, I just wanted to make sure that we all have a similar and aligned set of expectations around what this means, particularly to the extent that there's anything that we wind up with at any point here with Christine having some sort of a driving role. I prefer it the way it is, where it's the Energy Committee that's advising us on how to actually do this stuff. My comments up till now have been critical of the Climate Action Plan, not because I disagree totally with this. I do think carbon sequestration should be in there, but outside of that, I don't disagree with the strategic framework. My concern is it doesn't get translated into actionable things that are schedules and budgets, and I think that I've just had a difference of opinion about what a strategy is versus what maybe the committee has had up till now, and I'm looking for the real the actual concrete stuff that we're gonna do. Somebody has to figure that out and prioritize it and phase it and justify it from an economic standpoint to get the town support. So I would prefer to see that still in the Energy Committee as opposed to just dumping it on Christine's shoulders. But I also made another change in here around the fact that we're all accessible for the Energy Committee, so it's not, it's not like, so go do it and come see us in 3 years.
Exactly. I really feel very encouraged by the idea that we would develop long-range plans for your buildings and transportation to achieve the energy and GHG. The idea there is to grab both of them together, or what is in the Climate Action Plan around buildings and transportation, and then that will provide recommendations that I believe are actionable around the town, the priority being the town's.
There's some things the Energy Committee has done and has held for a long time that I'm total agreement with. I think it was 2 or 3 years ago was when the Energy Committee expressed the idea that, well, when we're trying to encourage homeowners to transition, for them, we're trying to encourage the town to transition, we will be looking to focus on when people get to the decision point when they have to replace their equipment. I think that's an important, when we talk about economics and what makes sense, that makes sense as opposed to, well, we need to have everything done by some arbitrary year. So there's a lot of things that the Energy Committee has expressed at a philosophical, strategic level, I guess, around what the timing and the focus is. I am in total agreement with. It's just that to me, there's a piece that says, well, this is the Climate Action Plan. This is our philosophy. Here's where the opportunities are for us to be doing things in the near term that I thought was lacking. Maybe I just didn't hear it or didn't pay enough attention, but that's the piece that that's why I would like to still see it here, because I'd like to see the Energy Committee still do that. Let me raise an issue, and this is an issue for Eileen and Pete. And this is a hard comment with a softer backdrop, I guess. In the very last paragraph, let me read how I reworded it and then tell you why. So the Select Board recognizes that the above list may not address all of the possible solutions to this problem and encourages the committee to, my words, develop and present recommendations to modify its own agenda and initiatives to present that to the Select Board as circumstances change or as new opportunities arise. And then I did some more stuff later on that was more wordsmithing. Let me tell you why I did that. I've had some concerns over the last 2 or 3 years, not exclusively about the Energy Committee, but about some other committees here in town who have come and asked the Select Board to appoint them to be committees. And there's a change in the attitude of those committees. When I first started getting involved with the town, if you were on a committee, your job was to try to provide the best recommendations you possibly could to the town. And if it's a committee appointed by the Select Board, it's coming back in with your best advice. Select Board appoints you, you give the town your absolute level best advice and expertise, and then either you do or don't do it. In the last couple of years, there have been some committees that have said, well, we're an appointed committee, we're going to unilaterally decide. In the case of the Energy Committee, it was we're going to unilaterally decide whether we're going to put articles in for the town meeting. Mark Sorrell has informed us that appointed committees have that authority. So they're not arguing because I'd be arguing against the law. I'm arguing against a process that any committee, and I'll give you an example, and I'll apologize to the people who were trying to get us to appoint the committee, but we had a discussion about the groundwater management committee. And there was one thing that was said in that discussion that just triggered me, which is the reason we want to be a town committee is because we'll be more powerful. Our committees, our appointed committees should not be about power. If there is power, it's the power of expertise, it's the power of persuasion, and the patience to present the arguments to the town, to present the arguments to the select board. If, in the case of the Energy Committee concludes it wants to come with an article for the town meeting, my only point isn't that, no, you can't do it unless we tell you can, because that's not the case, you can't. But the idea of coming before the select board to say, this is what we're thinking about, what we want to do, what I would call vetting. Now, if at the end of that whole process, we all say, well, we're voting against, or two out of three are disagree, or 1 out of 3, as was the case with the Tomcat article a couple of years ago, well, so be it. But that discussion is, I don't hear the adherence to the need to do that. And I'm not just directing this to the Energy Committee, I'm directing a couple of other committees. I think the town loses something when that discussion is not held, that the public can hear, the public can engage in. So I did divert this thing to say, yes, you're free because there are new issues, but I think you should present the developments and recommendations. It's not totally because that if we don't like them, you can't do them. It's that I think there's a flaw in the process that we've been following with too much unilateral action. And I would like to see that get shifted to a healthier discussion in the open. And we're spirited debaters if we want to debate, but we're probably better supporters if it's done that way. I've changed my mind on things when I've heard the argument for it, but when I don't hear for the argument for it, I don't change my mind. And then people vote the way they vote. So that's the biggest feedback, and I'll get you this whole thing.
I think that's good language to insert and is in line with what I've heard on the listening tour, is that our committee wants to be a valued partner to the town. So that's really what everyone was very excited about, that this starts to position us to really be collaborating with the town and assisting the town to achieve the goals. So I think that's in line with what I heard.
I'll have to share that with you guys so you can.
Yeah, that'd be great.
You know, there's still probably debatable wordsmith in here.
Okay, thank you.
That's it. Yep.
All right, Eileen.
As I said a few moments ago, I watched the meeting from last week. I've been watching the meetings over the past few months. I thank you very much for stepping up for chair. I love the way you run your meetings. You know, it's important that if you have an hour and a half, you get through what you need to get through, right? And you were very fair with letting everybody speak, and I thank you for that. And I did listen to the discussion, and I thank you for doing the listening tour. It's so important to just have that one-on-one, right? And when I heard you recap it, I can hear what I've been hearing around town, right? Not just what's here, but just people talking about, you know, the things that are important if we're going to achieve 2030 and 2050. So I agree, Gus, with what you were saying in terms of just some of the tweaks. I think what you've done, Penny, in cleaning it up, and as I said to you in our one-on-one, you know, I wasn't that involved in this back in 2008, 2009, so I read it just before I spoke with you, and I'm like, ooh, okay, wow, I don't think that's where you are today, right? So bring it back to center. No ill intent when I say that, but it's like, okay, let's get back to what the charter was intended for. So I think this is really, really well designed. So thank you.
Thank you. So I guess, Gus, you brought up an issue that I'll just respond to a little bit. I've been to most of the Energy Committee meetings for the 15 years that it's been in existence, and what I've seen at different times was town staff have been involved to different degrees. And I mean, Jerry McCarty, when he was the facilities manager, was at every meeting, and so that there was a direct town staff person there to assist the volunteers. That hasn't always been the case, and so that in the past several years, the Energy Committee has had difficulty connecting with the town staff people, and so that the Energy Committee has ideas that it has difficulty implementing or discussing with the department heads or whoever it is. And it just makes it more difficult to not have a town staff person who's involved. Hopefully that'll get changed when we get a sustainability coordinator, and Susan McPhee attends a lot of the meetings now, and so she in some ways is bridging that gap of having a town staff person. We've got a town consultant that's present, but that's based on funding available. I think her funding ran out, so I think that, I don't know if she stopped coming but I think something happened in terms of her funding level. And that gets back to that issue that I had with the Tomcat, and I don't care precisely how we do it, I just think that somebody in town needs to be responsible for having ownership of overseeing it and moving it forward. Unless somebody has ownership of things, they tend to just get set aside and not moved. And so I think somehow we need to figure out a way to have, and I don't know if the Energy Committee is the right place to do that. I had thought that the town administrator, where they have the oversight of all of the town employees, might have been a better place to have that reside, and then the town administrator can delegate out what needs to be done. Whereas the Energy Committee can't delegate out to town departments and town staff, the way the town administrator can.
Pete, can I ask you to just comment, just so I understand
Sure.
what you're saying? So, the town has done a lot of things. We've put up solar panels, and, you know, at the water treatment plant, we're looking at the DPW garage, we've converted all. I'm thinking the Energy Committee is the one that brought the LED lighting conversion over to us, and at the time, Mike Sullivan actually argued against it because he was worried about the long-term maintenance costs. And what I'm trying to understand is there are a lot of sound, what we have judged to be sound ideas that we have been able to act on. And all I'm trying to understand is if there was something that we used to do in the past, I still didn't see it as simply because it all got delegated someone. It actually came through in discussions. And like in the case, I was there when Mike was arguing against the LED lights, and I just said, well, it's important for us to cut energy. We'll take the chances on the long-term maintenance costs of these LED lights because they should be cheaper. This was a good deal from Eversource to get us converted over. And so we were willing to pull a trigger to do that, but the idea was presented to us in maybe a more effective way than some of the ideas I think have been presented more recently. I only say some because we do have solar panels going up on roofs, and so it's not like we're not having those discussions. If it's changed, I'm not sure. We were doing it somehow a few years ago and making those decisions, and it seems like we should still be able to make those kinds of decisions, but if you don't have somebody like the people with the expertise in the Energy Committee formulating those recommendations and making the case for them, then we're going to be floundering. So if there's something that you see that's different in how that worked, I'd appreciate understanding it.
As I say, I could just reiterate that I think the problem with having the Energy Committee in charge of the Tomcat is that the Energy Committee does not have management control over the town departments and the town personnel the way the town administrator does, and so that.
But the committee should be the one that's making the persuasive argument to get the town support. I'm really saying if you just say, hey, town, do it, the people that we're turning to do it are not the ones actually who have the expertise to know how to do it a smart way and the right way as the committee does. But the committee is a committee. It has to make a persuasive argument for doing what they do.
Well, I mean, one of the examples that I would cite for you, Gus, is the solar photovoltaics. I mean, the Energy Committee was talking about that for a long, long time before the town got around to adopting it. It just.
Are you talking about the home program, or the?
No, the town buildings. I mean, it took a long time, and part of the problem there, as I understand it, is that the sooner you got into the process, the more return you got from being in early, and there's less state support for the people who got in later. So I mean, I think we lost out a little bit on that, you know, but.
But, yeah, the economics of solar panels has changed a lot. I'm not sure how far back you're going. The thing on that point though, Pete, an argument that doesn't resonate well with me is, oh, the state's giving us money, so let's just do it. If it doesn't make sense for us to do it, then I don't care if the state's giving us money. That's what Pavlov did with dogs. Held the bone up, and the dogs all sit there and pant. It's great if the state has money. I've got solar panels. I took advantage of various incentives to put those solar panels up. I can be bought, or even enticed by dog bones, if you will. But the arguments I sometimes hear is, well, we have to do this because the state has money, and we don't have time. It's like, no, we have to know it's something we want to do, and then do it. I think maybe with the solar panels, the adoption of the idea, yeah, maybe what you're saying is, if you go back far enough, solar panels were new, economics on solar panels was questionable, reliability of solar panels at least was perceived to be questionable. I think we've kind of crossed that bridge. I think now we're sort of,
Yeah.
To be candid, the committee was hung up for a long time, whether we should own them
Mhm.
or do PPAs.
Yep.
Right.
Something I had advocated for a long time ago, to do PPAs. So to be honest, I think the committee has some ownership of the delay in moving this forward.
and I'm happy to accept the idea that some of the stuff we're doing here that's never been done before, we are prepared, I think we should be prepared to listen to arguments, to do pilots of things simply to learn. That's why I supported the charging stations over here in the parking lot right over here. That has not been an economic success yet.
Huh.
It didn't start off as a technical success, and right now, but that's not the point. The point is, we're learning.
Right.
We learn about the software. We learn, and then once we get the right software, we learn that the people that are handling the transactions don't necessarily pass that money on very quickly.
Huh.
And then on top of that, we learn that after that all starts to, I think at the last meeting was a report we've gotten, maybe it's a better number now, but it was like $45. Well, that's after 4 months. We got $45 for electricity. People have been paying, but $45. And then I guess the charger here was down. I don't know if it's back up or not, but,
It's back up.
okay.
It's just part of what we
It's
need to
part
do
of
to
it.
build in the
Absolutely.
infrastructure, because we know that gasoline engines are gonna disappear and everything's gonna be electric
Well,
eventually.
there's other issues around policy, but that's not even what I care about right now. Right now, we're learning about charging stations. Whether government should take over the refueling function of our country for all vehicles is a different issue. It's a policy issue, and we get far enough along to where we actually know these charging stations make any sense is the long-term solution. Right now, they're there, and we have electric vehicles, we need them, and we're getting smart by putting a couple of charging stations that Eversource primarily paid for to let us get smart. I'm good. We can do that.
So I think on next steps on this then, Gus, if you can share your
Yeah, I'll-
suggested
yeah.
edits, they sounded good to me. And Eileen and I can react to them at our next meeting, and then we can give you a revised charter from the select board.
So just just an administrative question. What I'll do is when I get home, I'm gonna scan this in color. I'll email it to you guys. I'll email it to Christine. I would suggest that I also email it to Penny, recognizing this may not be the last answer, so
Right.
don't overreact to it, but at least you'll get a sense of where I was coming from.
And Penny, if you have input on,
Yeah.
after you see Gus's edits, yeah, please share them with us, because
So I'll
we
do
welcome
that.
input. All right, and then the next issue is annual reappointments. And I would just ask that we have the correct name for the select board ex officio member. His middle initial is L, not P.
Ha.
This is your evil twin.
Doppelganger, huh? All right. I thought I was the evil twin. I have to rethink things now. Do we have a motion to do the reappointments then?
All right, so motion to annual appointments. I'll read off the ones that we're going to reappoint, then I will read off the ones that we have to accept resignation, and then we'll read off anyone that we don't appoint.
Okay.
So reappoint Hildren Pasas for reappointment, Penny Connor for reappointment, Paul Flechtl-Cotter, reappointment, Cynthia Green, reappointment. Robert Winograd, reappointment. George Whiting, reappointment. James Redding, reappointment. Andrew Jarrell, reappointment. Emily Loney, reappointment. Chris Gordon, reappointment. And then Christine Treeweiler, ex officiato, reappointment. Ulster L. Peterson, ex officio, reappointment. Do you want me to go to the accept resignations?
Sure, we can do it all at once, that's fine with me.
Unfortunately, accepting the resignation from Jim Neal, Megan Sullivan, Alex Stevens, Tricia Pembroke, and Eric Sharon.
Do we have a second on that then?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And then, so, I am moving that we don't reappoint Fred Davis. Is that something we need to acknowledge right now, since his name is on the list, but we're not reappointing him?
Oh, I'm sorry, what?
I don't think you have to vote to not do it, you just don't do
Okay,
it.
just want to make sure that that's acknowledged. I didn't read his name, and I'm not trying to skip it.
Oh, you specifically didn't read his name. Oh, and do you want to explain why?
No, I just don't want to, when we look at reappointing members, I don't believe that's a member that I want to support as a select board member.
Say again?
That's someone I don't want to support as a select board member. If that's my role as select board member, support reappointments or not.
Okay.
And Pete, I concur with that view.
Oh, all right. I didn't catch that when you were reading all the names.
That's why I wanted to make sure I called it out. I didn't want you to think I was
Yeah.
just pulling anything funny.
Did you, I wasn't quite sure whether, did you reappoint Penny then?
Yes, she was the second name I read.
All right, all right. All right, anything else, Penny, or are we all set?
Thank you, Penny.
Thank you so much.
I don't think you voted. You had a motion, you had a second, but you did not
We
have a
didn't
vote.
vote to the select.
We didn't vote, actually. We had a second.
Oh,
We didn't
You had
vote
a
on
motion
the,
and a second, but you didn't vote.
no, we did. All in favor?
That's what we didn't do.
Aye.
Aye.
That's actually why I was turning to look at you, because I didn't think you voted. I thought Gus and I voted.
All right, thanks again, Penny.
Thanks, Penny. So next, we'll go back to our first item, which is to recognize Sandra Cronin for 20-year work anniversary on September 15. Excellent. Thanks for bringing a happy thing to our meeting.
I just want to thank the board for the delay, and you're accommodating us, and demonstrates what Sandy does every day, which is pivot very quickly under emergency situations. We did have an emergency call minutes before 7 o'clock, and obviously that was our priority, so thank you for your patience.
Thank you for taking care of
We're here
business.
all
So you said, when you started off with this was in here.
So, let me just read to you, your certificate, which is the Town of Medfield, Commonwealth, Massachusetts, Certificate of Appreciation for 20 years of service presented to Sandra Cronin, in recognition of your dedicated service to the Town of Medfield. And testimony of the select board at years here too, and affix the seal of the Town of Medfield this 19th day of September 2023, and then we've all signed it. Thank you so much for your
Thank you very much.
dedicated.
You want to do it in front of here, so we're not kind of stuffy? Your portrait and landscape. Congratulations, thank you very much. I know, I went over here. That's why we're coming back here, there's so many wires, if we had them back there.
Next appointment is with Katie Walper, Director of Parks and Rec, to provide a semi-annual update. Katie, thank you for coming.
Thank you for having me. It's weird not being at the podium this time. So thank you, good evening. I'm Katie Walper, the Recreation Director. So a quick update about our summer wrap-up. We had average of 160 campers a week. We saw an 11% increase in participants across the board. We had 75 seasonal employees. A quick shout out to Kathy Vanderboom, who really helped streamline our process of onboarding. We switched it up this year, and she was very helpful with the switch up. We won the best camp in Medfield, and we were second in the region for our hometown weekly for camps across the state. Hinkley Swim Pond had a really busy summer aside from all the rain. Just a quick plug, we're always going to need lifeguards, even for summer 2024. We moved our summer seasonal swim passes to an online system, so all of our patrons have fobs, so they scan into the system now rather than having a business card. We hosted our first movie night, which held over 200 people at Hinkley Pond. We added additional supplemental camps to help with our wait list. I think the biggest thing that I adjusted to as a new director is that we do have a need for camp. We had our survey go out to all 565 families. The biggest thing is that we need more space. Unfortunately, right now, we are constricted to those numbers because of our space. When it rains out, the FAF Center, I know that we love 4 and 8-year-olds, but through that, they can't fit more than 125 because the space is limited on a rainy day. So our biggest feedback was more space. We did have an average of 55 kids on a wait list every single week that we were not able to accommodate. The grass was growing really fast, so Brian in the grounds department was very busy this summer. So that's a little wrap up of our summer. And then fall in programs and our events coming up. So our registration started in August for our fall and winter programs. So anything from now until December is online. We have field hockey with 120 participants. Our soccer league has over 250 participants. We also have paint night, karate, all are doing great. We added several new programs, but what we have seen is something that is really exciting is our Tiny Toons, our Mass Audubon Animal Adventure, our Business Sharks, our Crystal Quest, and our Puzzle Palooza are all running, and that is some with adult programming. Which is something a little bit different. We've upped our adult programming, but we really wanted to be able to offer some for all. We're promoting a Halloween glow. So we are going to be giving out glow sticks to families to help with safety during trick-or-treating so that they are visible. So that is a new program that we're adding. We also added a new Halloween bash that will be on Saturday, October 21st at Hinkley Playground. We'll be having face paint, music, arts and crafts, but something to bring our community together with the kids and families. This Friday night, we have movie night at Hinkley. We thought it would be a great plug for families to stay before Medfield Day, so we really come up with a community event. At this event, we're going to be having our disc golf demonstration that we had talked about a couple meetings ago. So we'll have some commission members having portable disc golf, so if any families want to come, our movie starts at 7 p.m. However, at 6 o'clock, we'll be having demonstrations, so we are getting ready for that. We added half-day programs for middle schoolers, so that way we are acknowledging some of our middle school programs we don't offer as much, so we this year are being directed on half-days to take them places that they want to go to and try to get them off their devices. We will host winter registration, so that's something new in the recreation. We are going to be hosting winter registration, so for all of our January to May programming, it will be launching in November, and that is our popular ski program with our middle schoolers. So any family that's watching, we will have that at the beginning of November. We've already had emails starting as soon as August about our ski program, so great. And then lastly is just our project updates. So Hinkley Playground is set to break ground in late fall or spring. We did sign our contract, so we were very excited about that. The Hinkley Helpers will have a table at Medfield Day. They're still selling bricks. So if you would like to support Hinkley Helpers, we are very close to our final fundraising. We added a zip line, and so that was an additional $8,000 to $10,000. So we're doing the final push. So we're excited for that. We have an Eagle Scout project at Hinkley Pond, having bat houses, so that is something on our plate. We're currently doing a field assessment. We haven't looked over our field for 10 years about our fees and our hours and what we're putting into our fields. We are winning awards for our field, but that's a lot of work. So we're looking at the field assessment of how many hours are being used and what we're putting into it. Disc golf is ongoing. We have demonstrations for residents. We're also working with Medfield TV to do a promotional video, just so we can educate our residents a little bit more on disc golf and what we plan to do. We're partnering with Medfield TV. They're having their Scarecrow event at Baxter Park, so they're excited for their first event. We're excited to support them. And then lastly, myself and Jackie are going to be going to Dallas to the NRPA conference for professional development. This will be my 5th time going. It will be Jackie's first time going, so we're excited for that. And then the last thing is that we are just revamping policies and procedures with our commission. We have looked over the rules, we've looked over our rentals agreements with MAP, as well as our rentals for birthday parties, special events. And then lastly, we're working on our refund policy. So a lot of changes in good ways, but we appreciate our residents that have been giving us a lot of feedback. We had open discussions as well as Zoom, as well as during our survey for summer wrap-up, asking what their feedback was and what we could do better and how we can better serve the community. And lastly, our next commission meeting is on September 27th.
Thank you. Gus, do you have questions, comments?
Yeah, well, first off, very impressed. You covered a lot of ground in a fairly short amount of time. You've clearly been busy. Yeah, what's the movie on Friday night?
Oh, so that's it. It was a hot debate. So we ended up being Hotel Transylvania 3, but we're hoping now, we got a lot of votes for Hocus Pocus 2.
Okay.
So now we might do that in November, December.
Oh, fun.
So Hotel Transylvania 3, that means there's 2 other ones that were in front of it?
Yes.
Wow.
We'll have to watch that tonight.
How did I miss them?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, a very impressive report. Thank you very much. I'm delighted to hear that the playground is coming along well, and I'm curious, is the zip line rated for adults as well, or is it just?
I hope.
Good, thank you.
Right, so you took one of my questions, so I was wondering what the movie was gonna be for this Friday night. And then, curious, how did the pickleball league work for the summer?
So we only had 4 registrants, so that was a little bit low. The whole pickleball league in total had about 20. So just for reference, we partnered with the Metro West Pickleball Traveling League. So we don't have pickleball courts in Medfield yet. But what we do is Millis and Medway invited us to come on board. So Medway, Millis, Franklin, us, Norwood, Westwood, and Rentham all joined and do a travel pickleball league. So we had 4 residents. 2 decided to not play because they had to consolidate down because we thought we'd have a lot more with all of those towns. So hoping, fingers crossed, a better outcome for spring. I think some of it we needed to have a pickleball meeting just to talk about it because there was a big confusion, like where are we playing?
Sure.
Are we playing at Metacomic? Like, nope, designated pickleball courts at Millis and Medway.
Gotcha. And then, curious, do you do any of your commission meetings via Zoom, or is it only in person?
It's only in person.
Is there any reason why they're not in Zoom? And I'm only asking because one night I wanted to go and I realized, oh shoot, you didn't have.
No, 9 months ago when I started, we only had it in person, but we could look at offering it via Zoom.
Okay. I only say that because it's sometimes like when there's so much going on,
Yeah.
like, I can catch the Medfield Energy ones via Zoom, or at least record, so if I can't be there, I can catch up with it later.
Yeah.
And you just have to borrow the owl, and you could.
You can have it.
And then the Halloween glow, do you mind explaining that? So will people go to the FAF Center if they want a glow stick, or how's that gonna work?
Oh, so the glow stick?
Yeah.
So we're hopefully partnering with the police department because it is a national initiation for recreation. So partnering with police. But basically what we're gonna do is we're gonna order probably around 250 either glow sticks. So there's foam ones now that people can put in their
Carrier for kids.
pillowcase, or the bucket, and then that promotes some visibility. Or we can go to the route of necklaces and bracelets. So once we order them, we're gonna do a launch day. If it's nice out, we're trying to have it at Hinckley Playground because it's one of the last times that we played on. But basically do a lunch party, so anyone that could come, it would be first come, first served basis, and then once we're out of glow sticks, we're out of glow sticks, and we'll order more for next year.
That's good. That's a great, I love that. So, yeah, and I heard just from residents, because I was around throughout the summer. The camps are going well, just a lot of real positive energy, and that's a direct reflection on you. So kudos, thank you so much for a successful summer, and thanks for all your leadership.
Thanks, Eileen. So you're a different department than most of our departments in that you guys make a lot of money. And you have a big revolving account. And how's that going in terms of the money in and the money out? Are you doing as well as last year, or how's it look?
As much as I know, yes. So that's the thing, is tracking. So what we're, like, that's part of the reason why I switched our Hinkley Pond passes online. So it's an easier way to track it. So that way I'm able to look at, like, how many did we sell last year compared to this year? So then it's also a great opportunity. The fobs can just be reactivated. So when the pond closed, now the fobs, I mean, there's nowhere else to scan in or us. So they're right now not active, but families who re-up for next year won't have to get a new fob. As far as what I can see, our participation in our numbers have been higher, so we are bringing in a little bit more money.
Good.
However, we're also using a little bit more money because of how rainy this season was. I'm working with Sarah in DPW talking about our gas expenses, so we saw that go up this year. So we're mowing a lot more, and so that's just something that we're tracking, but able to look at previous years to say, hey, we're about $2,300 more than last year, but we also had partially a drought, so we weren't doing a lot of it. But for the most part, when we are seeing the numbers go up, we are also seeing more income come in, which is nice.
Can I ask a question on that, if you don't mind?
Oh, sure, go ahead.
So in terms of employees, when it's raining, and I'm gonna go back to when I was wind pump director, right? If we had a rainy day,
Yeah.
we'd send everybody home. Before we knew it was just gonna be straight out rain, thunder, lightning, whatever, it was shut down.
So, yeah.
So is that one way that you actually, not that we don't wanna pay the kids, but if
Yeah.
they're not working, they're not working?
Yeah, so the only, at that point, some of the fields can actually do maintenance inside the shed, so we don't see that big of a cutback, so maybe they'll work a half day. The lifeguards will get cut for the day, but the camp counselors move inside. So yes, we do save on some payroll on the rainy days, which is a good thing, but we are also seeing nationally the cost of lifeguards are actually going up, and we are revisiting as a commission. We upped our average to $17 an hour this year. We're still under the average in our area, and that's a national shortage. So that's something that we're gonna struggle with, but we also had to pay expenses this year. Our lifeguards had to be waterfront certified, which they haven't done before, so that wasn't a cost to us. So we had to pay for that additional training for the lifeguards.
So explain that, not being waterfront certified.
So the state sees water for two ways of waterfront, either a pool or an open waterfront.
Okay,
We're, even though a small pond, we're an open waterfront according to the state of Massachusetts.
interesting.
So therefore, our lifeguards have to be lifeguard certified as well as waterfront certified, because there's a different way for training for
Sure.
any emergency circumstances, but specifically for drowning. It's a deep water search versus a clear pool versus a pond where you start dropping weights. So it's a big difference between pools and a waterfront. So we also just had to do a cost that we didn't feel that the lifeguards should have to pay for that, because we had already hired them at that point. So I was under the assumption that they had already been certified, but it's okay. It was a 2-day course. The guards did a great job, so we're very lucky to have them. One of the greatest things that I thought coming on is we didn't have a shortage of lifeguards in Medfield and all the other surrounding towns. Like, we actually had too many. So 3 or 4 of our guards actually worked part-time. I'm close with the Walpole Recreation, and they had a really difficult time, and we're shutting down their pools. So some of our guards actually went over and helped them.
Yeah, you read a lot about the guard shortage in the papers the last several years, so you've
Yeah.
been doing okay, good.
Yeah, we're doing okay.
How many guards and counselors do you guys run?
Camp counselors in total.
Yeah, and
So
guards.
this year, we also moved to a model of camp counselors were allowed to have time off. So we had 50 full-time staff members for camp counselors and then 10 substitutes. So what we've got to do is, in the application process, they listed all of their time off requests, and then Jackie and I worked to get coverage with our 10 substitutes. So we had a lot of camp counselors, which is awesome to apply. We did see a very young candidate pool. 14 and 15-year-old, and although we can hire them, it's too close in age because we actually have 14-year-old campers as well. So that was a struggle for us in Medfield, is that we had a lot of 14, 15-year-olds. So in total, we had 50 with 10 subs, and then we had 15 to 18 lifeguards.
You're reminding me of my first job at age 16, washing dishes. They hired me for the summer, 7 days a week. And I thought, oh,
Yeah,
every night, okay.
very grateful for our staff.
All right, and I guess that's all the questions that I had. It's going good then, Katie, huh?
Thank you.
Thank you, Kate.
See you in 3 months.
All right, thank you. Our next item is under discussion items. We've got a potential votes. It says, discuss proposed request from Pulte Homes of New England for water and sewer easements and connections in anticipation of their proposed development at Junction Street, Dover, Mass. Chris, do you wanna, you've been dealing with Pulte about this, I guess, haven't you?
Sure, we had an informal request from 2 members of the Pulte team asking for water and sewer easements and/or connections into our water system. That was presented to you. I believe you have discussed that, and you're prepared to fill in the public as to that discussion.
Yep. And I think basically, well, do you want to go ahead and start, Gus?
I think we have a pretty clear answer, so if you just want to deliver it, and if there's questions, I'm more than happy.
Well, all right, I'll talk about my own view on it, which is that there isn't much benefit to the town in providing water to Pulte to put in a 40B project in Dover. That would basically have more impact, given where it's sited on the town of Medfield, than anybody in the town of Dover. So there's no real reason, I think, in my mind, for Medfield to be assisting Pulte in doing a 40B in Dover, including providing water or sewer access to them, so. Anything else from
I think
you
that
guys?
was, my perception of our prior closed door conversation was that was a
Yeah.
unanimous view. There's absolutely no particular reason that we could see why it would be a good thing for the town to do. And as it is, the sensitivity around capacity, think of the discussions around the state hospital development, think
100%,
about
yeah.
other potential developments and the sensitivity people have to not pushing our capacity limits on either water or sewer. Made it a pretty clear no for me, that's for sure.
100%. And you just said it, and when we were up at the state hospital today, walking the grounds, I mean, we want the state hospital to happen. We don't want, water's a precious, precious resource. We have a good structure here in Medfield. We're not trying to be selfish, but it's a concern that nobody knows what lies ahead in the future. So right now, we need to make sure that whatever we're doing up at the state hospital, we certainly hope everything comes together with what the Trinity plan is, but so all of that gets buttoned up, we absolutely positively have to make sure we focus on making sure our water and our sewer systems are top-notch and they're concerned about our citizens. So it was a pretty easy one.
Okay.
Okay.
Any questions on that one? Ms. Potts?
I think 100% of the town would concur.
Yes, yes. And that's part of why we wanted to say something. We didn't want anyone to think that we were keeping it hush-hush.
Shots, 7 First Street. Just 2 basic questions. Do we know how much water we're delivering to Dover Sherburne now? I mean, the information was from 1961. I just didn't know it. Correct?
It's a little over 1 million gallons a year.
A million now.
Yeah, and that's just to the school district, not to the town.
Right.
Yeah.
Thanks. And then this is more a question for town council, but is there any possibility of a legal sort of mandate that Medfield has to supply water for a 40B, it's an unfriendly 40B?
So we have retained outside counsel for this project,
Okay.
and so we will discuss that when that issue
Okay, so
arises,
it's
yeah.
not a black and white answer.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you.
I would just comment, because I've actually looked into this issue in the past, and I've seen the Housing Appeals Committee order towns to install water and sewer capacity for 40Bs, but
But it was within their own town.
within their own town, and
That's a
so
big
I can't
distinction.
imagine that they would do that to an adjoining town. Doesn't make sense to me, but that doesn't always
And there's a
mean
whole,
that it carries the
if it
day.
were not that, there's a whole process that involves DEP, and so I think the town will be in a good position, to push back if that were, if that issue were to arise.
Yeah, you know, DEP is trying to tell us to be careful on our water use, and so it would not make sense. It wouldn't be logical. Anybody else? Our next item is to discuss and vote on town administrator performance evaluation, and we're gonna hold on that. And, Chris, should we hold on the vote on the goals then too, until we do that at our next meeting?
Yes, I think you're still discussing how you want to handle either the TomCap goals or the Energy Committee goals for me, so I think until you have a further discussion about that.
Okay.
Yeah, I think, although I think our last discussion, last time, I don't think Eileen, either you or I were in favor of putting that on Christine, so Pete, to your point, if there was something to be done, if you still wanted to push that issue, I would say you probably need to be more, if you have a goal, you'd have to be more, I don't know, call it narrow or specific before for all the reasons that I already shared with Penny.
I'll give it some more thought then.
we did have, like, I kind of comment from last week, so there's a couple of.
Yep, there's a couple
so
that you'd like to add.
We probably have to figure that piece out, but that's.
Yep, I'll draft those up and send them out before the next meeting.
Okay, cool, thanks. I got your email that you got my spreadsheet today, so you're good.
I did. Thank you for sending that. Our next item is to discuss options for structure of potential town charter bylaw review, and we got a memo from Mark. Do you want to tell us about that, or?
So I tried to really summarize it. And I'll go right to the bottom line, that there's several options that are laid out in that memo. But in terms of, if you go the statutory process for a charter review commission, you lose flexibility and control. Once that commission is established, they pretty much are on their own. You have no legal authority over them unless and until they bring something back. My recommendation is the informal, that you appoint a committee. The committee has the flexibility in terms of taking input. You have the flexibility and control over how they operate, with the interaction. Ultimately, you come to some sort of consensus as to what's needed, and then you draft something and submit it through town meeting to the legislature.
So Mark, in the first paragraph of what you wrote, it says, as a preliminary matter, there is no statutory or locally mandated procedure for informal review of the charter. You're therefore free to appoint an ad hoc committee. Is there a mandate for a certain review of the charter on some periodic basis?
Yes.
That's in the charter itself, I believe.
So that's supposed to happen every
10 years.
10 years, and the last time we did it was,
The last time was around 2011. We did the bylaw review, 2011.
so we're past the 10-year mark.
In putting this together, I went back and I had a variety of other memos and notes that are pretty consistent. We have implemented some of the minor changes I had recommended. A lot of the major ones still need to be resolved, particularly centralization of authority and the role and function of the town administrator in the 21st century.
So Mark, you're saying you've already put some thoughts together on what those
It
issues
hasn't,
are?
not recently, but it hasn't changed greatly from what has come up over the years. It's the same issues. The town is, first of all, the town administrator compared to her colleagues. There's a practice, I think, that kind of overlooks what the real authority is, whereas the trend is to put legal authority in the town administrator by analogy to a corporation, you're the board of directors and that person is your CEO. So, you know,
So what's the major difference between the town administrator position and a town manager position? Isn't it just the appointments?
it's huge in personnel, huge in the area of personnel.
Okay.
Town administrator, in the town manager model, the town administrator does the hiring, firing, handles the disciplinary proceedings generally, at least in the first instance. And you provide, your involvement with much more oversight, more limited.
And that's realistically, in my mind, what we do. We're not,
Well, just as an example, if you had a disciplinary matter, various types of disciplinary matters where you're the hiring authority, if she's the hiring authority, you don't have to deal with open meeting law issues on top of everything else. If the three of you are, you do. So then you have to either go under the exceptions that are available under the open meeting law, or you have to address it. It's very cumbersome. And then there's a lot of decentralization still in this town, elected boards and committees, with authority, I think, for hiring. And it goes back, in some cases, to pre-charter special legislation that created, like the Water and Sewer Board, Park and Rec, and when they adopted a charter, those were not properly addressed, number one, and number two, it wasn't all brought together the way it would be if you were approaching it today, which again, centralized, all answerable to the town administrator.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. So, are you saying that you have other written documents that you can give us in addition to this memo that you've done over the years or something? Is this what we should be going by?
Just kind of just like checklists, but the major items are what I just covered.
Okay, all right. Anything else, guys?
Just a comment, in thinking about, so first off, if we have to do this, I assume we're gonna do it, and we'll figure out which way to do it, so I get that. For me, speaking personally, some of what you just covered, Mark, it would help me in thinking about how to go about doing it if I had a sense of what it is that we are actually thinking would be the most important things to need to be changed. So you kind of just talked about those things, but I'm wondering, is that all there is, or are there other, you know, I would kind of like to know, the reason I'd like to know is because if we do form an informal committee, the nature of the areas of change would probably influence my thinking about who should be serving on that informal committee, and without having put a lot of thought into what would be wrong with our charter, probably because I haven't spent enough time reading our charter in the first place to even have an opinion. You know, I'm just looking at how we operate, and it's like, well, there's some things that can be fixed, but in some ways, I'm not a big fan of centralization simply to have centralization, because centralization can work against the transparency it feels like in the public participation that I think is important for a town of our size. On the other hand, I bet Christine has some views about some of the decentralization makes it hard to do her job, and I would be open to those arguments as well. So I'm trying to calibrate right now how to even think about this stuff.
Eileen?
So, last time we reviewed it in 2011, did we make any changes at that point when we reviewed it?
Codified.
That was more of an administrative codification. That was, yeah, that's what I thought. So the committee, 2011, Scott, but they chose more, I guess I'd call it an administrative upgrade than a content upgrade.
Can you just send could you give me like a for example, if it was anything,
So you know the book that we have?
the blue book that you gave me that I've been,
Yes.
A loose leaf.
That was not codified before, so we basically organized it and literally codified it so that it would make sense when you read through it.
okay.
Other than that, but prior to that, it was kind of pieces, parts put together. There was no one document to look at like we have now.
So as a private, there are multiples, but there's at least one big player that's what they do. They go into municipalities, they take your charter and your bylaws, and they put them in an organized form. That's what was done.
But I'd have to go back and look, but I believe the committee also reviewed several of the existing bylaws that we have. I just don't remember off the top of my
I
head.
don't remember
everything
any
that they did.
significant changes.
Yeah.
We've done some minor charter changes since.
Is there anything jumping, and I know we need to do the review, so I'm not saying we're not gonna do it, but sometimes you do a review because you know you wanna change something. Is there anything jumping out at you two that we know that is hindering us moving forward in certain areas or not benefiting the town?
From my view, to Mark's point about sort of discipline and the management of town personnel, I actually am sympathetic to the idea that if there's a way you can do that without being burdened by open meeting laws, because my background was more around HR and the kinds of laws that normally protect employees. So in a very strange way, almost everything we do with your evaluation, this kind of convoluted kabuki dance we do, that's, my experience is that's against the law, except apparently it's not in this one particular instance. So things that show more respect for the privacy of town employees without sacrificing the ability of management to oversee and hold those employees accountable. Personally, I would be in favor of that. The fact that I don't have my finger in that pie doesn't bother me one bit, because I'm not close enough to really have a strong view.
Well, I think the only thing I would say, Gus, I think the reason there are certain citizens that are happy that we have discussions is we're being 100% transparent, right?
Right.
So to that, the more transparent we can be, I support that.
Mhm.
But if it's a burden or it makes it harder for a candid conversation to be had, that's the challenge.
That's, in fairness, I'm mostly thinking about the kinds of conversations we should have to help people figure out how to do their jobs better.
Right.
But it's also circumstances where somebody has demonstrated an inability to do the job and you have to take action. It's usually not appropriate to have that full circumstance be out there, and not because we're hiding anything, but because it's just respect for the person. If they're not, this isn't the right spot for them, you should be able to help get to a conclusion of that point without having to be a matter of public record.
So what's the next step here?
I think it's for us to digest Mark's suggestions and to come up with a way forward. To me, it makes the most sense to go the informal route that Mark's talking about of getting special legislation. But how do we get to what we want to do? I mean, I guess you were suggesting that we appoint a committee to work through the issues. That makes sense.
You really need a mix of skill sets and you need to think outside the box, in my humble opinion, for who you put on that committee. You give it a lot of thought. For instance, so that you don't have any, but Medway, which is near and dear to my heart. Medway got about as low as you could possibly get. It was this close to being taken over by the state. And part of that was determined, there was no charter, there had never been a charter in Medway. Because of everything that had gone on, they set up a committee and they went out of their way to ensure that nobody on that committee was tainted. So none of them had any experience with government. And the result of that was they had some great ideas, but you don't, that's kind of the shock which you might remember from years ago, coming from the private sector into the public and realizing you can't do this, you can't do that, whatever. You got a bunch of people on a charter commission, they have no idea what they're doing, in terms of no background, no context. They came up with a very thorough charter, more so than it ever needs to be. A charter is supposed to be an outline. This thing is, I think, 46 or 50 pages. and defines absolutely everything. But they had no context, and then when you actually passed it and it got into operation, then it became apparent what the shortfalls were, that were easy fixes if you had some people involved that could bring the governmental experience to the table.
Christine, do you have, my first issue is around trying to get calibrated on what would be the most likely things that we would need to get fixed or upgraded or modernized. And, okay, I get one part of it might be around the oversight and administration of town employees, I get that. I don't know, this is the thing that cleans up the strong chief, weak chief, not the chief that you thought might clean up that one, that's another one that would come to mind for me, but I don't know what else. It's not like I'm saying nothing needs to be fixed, I don't know what else would need to be fixed, I don't know whether you
So
have some views.
I think that's why you would form a committee. Have the committee review that.
Well, but if you form that committee, they're gonna know less than I do. Unless somebody out there that knows more than I do is identified, and I'm saying I'd kinda like to, I'm not trying to control anything, I'm just trying to get a sense of bigger than a bread box, smaller than a barn, is this a task that requires the constitutional convention, like we had before after the Revolutionary War? Is this a rewrite of the dog control bylaw?
Well, I mean,
I don't know, if it's a big deal or a little deal, and I don't know what pockets would be the ones that probably have
I
the
mean, my
most.
recommendations would be that you would go through your major standing, your governmental structure and the major players, you would define their authority, powers and authority limitations.
Well, but
And then there's a lot of cleanup that, first of all, there's no definitions, there's no comprehensive description in the charter of the town administrators, full authority.
So is this yet another administrative update? I mean, what I'm getting at is either there's changes here, and those changes are driven by some starting philosophy about which direction we need to head. I don't have a good sense of what direction we need to head. I appreciate your point about centralization in terms of oversight of staff. I get that. But when we're talking about going through and figuring out what authorities and powers the various levers of departments in the town have, I don't know how to intelligently comment on that. I mean, if there's nothing there, I guess we could make it up, but even there, we would be making it up. I'm looking for some anchor.
Well, it's just, you can't underestimate how big the components that we just talked about, the authority and the relationship, town administrator, to the operation of town, and the various boards and commissions that exist right now independently.
Well, I agree with you, Mark, but I'm saying, yeah, but where are you trying to pull that horse? Are we basically trying to take the independence of all those boards away?
Well, in the context of,
I think you're both getting a little ahead of yourself, because I think when Chris brought this up at our last meeting, it was just a reminder that you are obligated to do this every 10 years. But I don't think, we haven't had a chance, at least Mark and I haven't had a chance to sit down and talk about what we would like to see changed. It was just
Okay.
more a reminder that, it's not, the idea of changing anything is not coming from Mark and I. It was just a recommendation that it was a time period.
No, and I buy that, and so now I'm hearing something different, the next step to the question that was on the table, where do we go from here? I'm happy
Yeah.
to say that you and Mark get together and come up with if this is the right answer, or whoever that's knowledgeable gets together and says, listen, this is not a definitive answer, this is just the starting list of issues. I don't know what we're looking at trying to change.
So why don't we do this? Why don't we just keep this on our list of
Sure.
agenda items, and we'll,
Okay.
I'll go and Google it and see what I come up with, and we'll all try to figure things out, and we'll talk about it again.
Okay, I'm good with that.
it's actually, there's like the mass practice municipal law has a sample one, I think, from Winchester. So there's plenty of samples out there.
Oh, okay.
Medway's is extremely comprehensive, that's the problem, it's, in my opinion, too detailed, but certainly covers all the bases. And they went to the two components I was talking about, which was a strong TA and a centralized form of government, so that would show you how that works. As I said also, from a housekeeping standpoint, when the charter was adopted, it should have made very clear what was happening to special legislatively created committees, such as water and sewer, such as park and rec. It didn't, which creates a hybrid situation when you have authority issues involving those boards.
So I mean, I tend to think that we'd be better off with a town manager, just from what little I know about it. I mean, a lot of our agenda are things that I would think a town manager would just take care of on their own, his or her own. I mean, granting block party permits and liquor licenses and one-day liquor
We
licenses.
could change that part of the charter.
So-
I don't want the sandwich boards, I'm just putting that out there, I don't want the sandwich.
But you have to take the car washes. We'll negotiate. All right. So we'll keep talking about charter changes
Do you
and,
want to recognize Chris?
Good.
Here's a question.
pardon? Oh, Chris,
Yeah, can I go?
please come to our table so
Well, you're the
people
one
at
that
home can
started
hear
this
you.
whole
Yeah, I want to correct the record on that one though, because it actually came out of an ad hoc conversation when we were talking about the number of select board members.
That would be a
And
big
then
one.
Christina had mentioned the fact that
Yeah, I mean, a lot of
we were
towns-
overdue with the charter, so it's not just me.
Through Christina, but us.
No, no, no.
Go back through my notes.
It was a collaborative conversation. But I think the other thing that I just want to mention is, I mean, in my own head, it was, to me, it was less about the charter, it was also as much about the bylaws, because as I'm sitting in all these different committee meetings now, I'm hearing from multiple committee members saying, oh gee, we really need to update our bylaw in this area, we need to update it, it's out of date. And I'm hearing this now from multiple committees, but, you know, I empathize with, as volunteers, they just don't have the bandwidth to take this on. So, you know, should they be responsible, you know, as their own, you know, entity to take these bylaws and bring them forth? Or could a bylaw charter committee somehow, in some way, lend some support to members of committees who say, we just haven't been able to tackle this, and could we somehow get some support in doing this, because we just haven't been able to, we don't have bandwidth. So I've been hearing this now from at least 4 different committees where they're concerned about their bylaw being outdated and wanting to make some changes, they just can't take it on. So, just put that into the next discussion.
It all takes time. Okay, our next item is to discuss an approved plan for Norfolk County ARPA fund reallocation for interface referral services, and I guess, Chris, you've given us a.
Yes, so let me just go through this. We talked at length with Kathy McDonald at the last meeting, and, you know, one of my rules is don't do math live in front of a committee. So we asked for some time to go back and review with Kathy what we had originally appropriated from ARPA for a spending plan for Medfield outreach, and then what it could look like based on, with Kathy's input and our idea that interface is where we needed to spend more of our money rather than the fuel assistance. So originally we had appropriated $230,000 for 2 years of funding for interface as well as fuel assistance. In working with Kathy this week, we are proposing a 4-year funding model for interface, and the remainder of that, which would be $58,000, to be used for the fuel assistance. I know when we also last talked, we talked about just doing the 3 years for Medfield outreach, but I think we're proposing, after meeting with her, that we would do the full 4 years and still leave her some fuel assistance money. And that does not go into any additional ARPA allocations. It's just reallocating what you've already voted on.
Okay. Questions, comments, Gus?
Yeah, so that's meaningful, it's actually, we're just reallocating the money, and I think philosophically, given what interface does for people, that's a need that seems more pressing for me.
Yes.
But the interface, the funding is for 4 years of interface, that 58,000 that's left for fuel assistance, is that for 4 years of fuel assistance, 1 year of fuel assistance, how does that work?
That would need to be expended by the end of 2026. So we would, so we could use that, but yeah, it's basically 3 years.
So I guess my real question
Yeah.
was, how
2 winters.
Our fuel assistance, how much fuel assistance do we give now? What does this do to what the town has been doing in the area of fuel assistance?
So the town doesn't do any fuel assistance money. It runs through the Medfield Foundation. So this will add to what is available through the Medfield Foundation and what's through, I believe SMOC still runs the fuel assistance program as well.
Okay, thank you, Pete.
I wasn't aware of that, actually. So I know that the Medfield Foundation raises money through the Angel Fund that goes into, well, the Angel Run, it goes into an Angel Fund, but that's administered in a way that I don't know what happens to it.
Yes,
Yeah.
so this would be in addition to what's already available to our residents in town.
I'm glad to hear that we
Based on
do
what-
that.
Based on what Kathy had to say when she came to see us, and based on just intuitive observation of what's
Mhm.
going on in our society right now, I think interface is a good thing that we're supporting, and we should continue to, so.
Eileen?
I'm fine with that.
No, I'm fine. This, I said to Christine when we first sat down, I saw this in front of me. This is just basically following up on what we were trying to sort out for numbers. Now we have the numbers in front of us from last week, so 100% support
Okay,
this.
I'm fine with
Great
it too,
cause.
so, do we need to vote on this, discuss
I think if you
it?
would just vote the reallocation as
Okay.
presented here, we'll work with Kathy and Frank will get started with Norfolk County on that right away.
All right, so motion
Great.
to approve plan for Norfolk County ARPA funds reallocation for interface referral services.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, aye. Next item is vote to allocate $7,255.83 from the Municipal Building Stabilization Fund Emergency Reserve Fund for repairs after flooding at the public library.
Yes, we had several storms this summer, and we had a flooding issue in the library. We had to bring an outside company to come in to remediate that, and the bill for that is a little over $7,000. That exceeds what we have in maintenance for the library budget and the facilities budget. So we are asking for that from the emergency fund.
That bill went on for pages. It was very
It did,
detailed.
this is
It
pretty
was.
detailed.
Service pro.
Yeah, and I do, even though it does look like we brought an outside company in that did a tremendous amount of work, the librarians themselves and
Sure,
the
a
library
lot.
director were actually downstairs operating the wet vac, so I appreciate everybody in
Good for
facilities and everybody in the library for helping out on that project.
Yeah, excellent.
All right.
Any questions, Gus?
Yeah, just, well, when I first went through this, I was having a hard time. So Service Master is the one who did the work.
They did the work.
We don't have any insurance that covers any of this?
So our insurance deductible for water is $10,000, and that was raised by the insurance company several years ago when we had several roof issues. They raised it on us.
So this is less than the deductible?
It's less than the
that's why we're
deductible,
paying directly.
yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Got it.
Okay.
I'm good.
All right, we have a motion?
I just had a question, Chris. Do we know what caused the leak?
Yes and no. We know where it was coming in. We don't know why, other than this was the first horrible rainstorm we've had in several years after the drought last year.
Yeah.
We were able to get in. DPW was incredibly helpful with helping us do a partial drain there, and we have some building engineers working at the building now. It's basically where the old section of the library and the new section of the library meet. Yeah.
Was it water coming down the walls or something like
Yes.
that, or it
Yeah,
wasn't coming from?
and then
okay.
coming up from the ground as well.
Yeah,
through the floor.
Okay.
And that reason, this is not the leak in the town hall, this is the leak in the.
This is the leak in the library. Yep,
Is there another bill for the town hall, or?
it's coming.
Can we
So-
bundle them and make the bin roll?
I wish.
Motion to vote to allocate $7,255.83 from the Municipal Building Stabilization Fund Emergency Reserve Fund for repairs after flooding at the public library.
Second.
All in favor? Aye, aye.
Thank you.
Next item, discuss the creation of MBTA Zoning Advisory Committee.
So this came up, Pete and I had a conversation. He had seen several other towns that were forming MBTA zoning advisory committees. Maria had been working with our consultant, who was on board to address the MBTA zoning, multifamily zoning for us. And they recommended as well that it's such a complicated issue and involves a lot of education for our citizens that it may be helpful to have a member of each board that is affected by this, the Affordable Housing Trust, the Planning Board,
Sure.
and then several citizens at large. So we were having that discussion, and I told Pete we would bring it forward and have a discussion with all of you about it.
So what's the purpose of the committee?
The committee will review what the consultant is proposing for our zone and help do our forums and our workshops if we need to bring an article to town meeting in May.
Where does the decision get made to accept or reject what the consultant comes out with?
That is gonna be the select board and the, planning board.
Because it seems to me that's the first step in this process
Mhm.
before we form a committee to implement something that we haven't even seen or decided to.
Mhm.
I kind of was blind. I'm not sure what this was all about, but the idea that we're going to start educating the citizens about what something will be that's, given that we have a pending the possibility that we'll have an answer that will be adequate at the state hospital. So it's not that we won't comply. I'm a little alarmed that we're sitting there starting to educate the citizens about what is involved here, pending what the consultants come up with. Because that sounds like somebody saying, I don't think that's gonna work, and we're gonna need 50 acres of 15 unit per acre zoning somewhere in town. And before we bring a committee forward to do that, I would like us to make the decision. Yeah, I'd like to know we're at that fork in the road before we start acting like we're going down a particular fork.
I'm not I mean, I think what you're saying is spot on. We don't even know what's going on, so to advise, we have to figure out what's happening. I mean, the meeting we had today, hopefully it will impact what's gonna, but until all of that, the dust settles.
Right.
So, it's not something we have to act on right now, but it's something down the road.
So when I saw that Needham was doing it, and so I suggested to Chris that I thought it was a good idea. And it's, in my mind, it's because it's a complicated enough issue. I mean, I keep trying to figure it out, and I haven't figured it out yet.
In
And
what sense do you say it's complicated?
as to how you comply with the requirement to zone as of right 50 acres for 15 units an acre. And why the hospital doesn't comply, whether you can spread it out to other areas or.
Well, I think the law says you have to have 25 contiguous acres, then the other 25 can be split out. It's not complicated, it may not be easy, it may actually be destructive, but it's not complicated, or it might be, Pete, I'm just saying.
Yeah,
What
all
I
right,
know, it's
then,
not complicated.
can you zone, the Montrose School has 10 acres, so can you zone the Montrose School property for MBTA zoning, multifamily use? You know, it's that sort of issue that I think that somebody should be looking at and figuring out.
But the Montrose School land, pardon my ignorance, if that's their land, why would we be zoning what they own?
Because we have to zone.
It has to be private land according to, right? You can't zone public land, it has to be private land, so you're gonna be zoning land that people own.
I mean, if we don't comply with the MBTA zoning, then we
Give up a lot of money.
won't qualify for all kinds of state money, and they just added like another 7 things that you won't qualify for in the
15,
past
to be
month,
honest.
so.
I think it was 15.
But Pavlov's training is going well coming down from the state. That by itself, I understand the implication, Pete, but that by itself does not drive my decision-making. That's if at some point here, the state is continually intruding in what should be local authority, and at some point, you have to sit there, and I don't know that this is the point, because I don't know that we have the problem, because we may have the solution, and we can accommodate what the state wants without, I don't wanna fight theoretical battles, but at some
Well, I
point,
don't
you
think
have to
that-
decide whether you're standing up for what your town is, or whether you're just a puppet that makes it appear you're managing your own destiny, and it's really state agencies playing whatever games they play from wherever they're sitting, telling us what we need to do. I mean, this is serious stuff.
Oh, yeah, and that's why I think that it would be helpful to the town to have some sort of committee that's spending some time looking at it. That was only the extent of my thinking, Gus, that it has to be addressed, and it made sense to me to have a committee that would get formed to address it.
The only thing I think of is, and correct me, Christine, if I'm wrong in making the statement, but I think Maria is on top of this. Like to me, she's the point person for the town. And so the only thing I don't want to do, because I know she is stretched so thin, is that we put another committee together right now. That's just adding more time, more on her plate, when I'm confident in what she's doing, I'm confident that the information, like, I know she's on the Affordable Housing Trust, she shared a ton of information. So what I don't wanna do is burden the people we know that we're going to have to lean on when we're leaning on them already for that purpose.
So let me have a conversation with her and I'll get back to you. We also had very positive conversations at our site meeting today at the state hospital, so, let's see where that goes today and then we can revisit this.
All right. Our next item is a vote to designate William Keegan as the appointing authority hearing officer for a pending matter pursuant to General Laws, Chapter 31, Section 41.
So I have a potential personnel matter that will come before, that comes under civil service, under General Law, Chapter 31, Section 41, which requires a hearing officer to be appointed. And after speaking with Labor Council, we are asking that you designate Bill Keegan, who is a former town administrator, as the appointing authority hearing officer. He would do the hearing, and then the hearing would be presented to the Board of Selectmen after that.
Is there any information? So apparently it's a civil service issue. And at this point in time, it's not appropriate for us to know anything at all about it. I don't mind doing it.
Yes, I can't,
Okay.
sorry.
Eileen, anything?
No, I,
Okay.
Go
then,
forward with the motion.
Maybe you can advise us on the
Motion.
MBTA communities at the same time.
motion to designate William Keegan as the appointing authority hearing officer for a pending matter pursuant to General Law, C 31, Section 41.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Next item, 13, discuss and potential vote to authorize the town administrator to issue the RFP for ground lease for Lot 3, so I'll recuse myself.
I can start if you want, Eileen.
Yep.
I don't think we're ready to act on this. I went through it in depth, and I can probably, if I catch up with you on the other stuff that we're gonna talk about, we can sit down and go through this. And I can, if you want a copy, I can scan
Why
this
not?
and
I
send
love
it
reading
to
your
you.
stuff.
First off, I think I know where this RFP's originals was drawn from. I'm guessing it was probably, because there's one place that still has sites 2018. So I'm guessing it's the RFP that we used at the state hospital or something like that.
I think this was a draft of the Lot 3 RFP and one from 2018 as well.
So here's the problem that I see with this RFP as it's written. This RFP is written with a foot in two different boats. If this was, lot number 3 is a sale, or not even a sale, that's the other thing. It's not a sale. It's a lease. So there's a place where it refers to sale, so that's just editorial wordsmithing. Part of it reads like what we did to get Trinity on board, which is here is our master plan and strategic plan. This is the concept we want. Come in with a proposal. You're a real estate developer, come in with a proposal to basically, deliver this concept or something as close as you can. That's just somebody to come in and develop the land to be something. But we're not specifying what that something is. The other part says, what we need is a pro forma business plan. We need you to tell us what you're gonna be doing as a business. And then, by the way, here's all the prohibitions that you can't do. And I do have a question on how any agreement we had, at least with Kingsbury, prohibited manicure and pedicure and beauty shop operations. I don't remember the list being that long. I understand physical therapy because they're there. I guess I understand massage therapy because physical therapy bleeds over to that. I'm not sure I even understand physical therapy rehab, because I don't think they're doing that. I understand restaurants, but there's a big long list, and it's like, so we're gonna put out something that says, here's a piece of property, you need a business concept for it. You can't do all these things, which would mostly be logical things that you would wanna do with that property. And on top of that, you have to tell us how you're a good developer. And it's like either we're selling it to somebody who has a business concept that they wanna put in place there, and then it's up to them to get somebody to build the thing that they want, because they're just leasing land from it. Or we have an idea of what we wanna use it for, in which case, then we're looking for a developer to implement our concept for that land, in which case, we're not necessarily, unless it's a Trinity that wants to also run an apartment complex, it's not really exactly a lease. So I'm feeling that, I thought I knew I figured that's where it came from, but the way it's structured, it's got 1 foot in 2 boats. And either this is a straight transaction that says, we wanna lease this property, here's a bunch of stuff you can't do, come in with us with a concept. Or we're saying, we have a concept and here we want you to implement. I don't think we have a concept. So my own view, just after having done this and without having, mulled it over for a couple of weeks, is what I think we might wanna do is basically say, put out a notice that the town is looking to lease that property, but as the first step in that process, we are looking for business propositions from potential lessees who would like to introduce a business on that property. And we will then look at what those concepts are and determine which of those ideas we would like to invite people to submit an actual proposal for. Now, I don't know if that runs afoul of laws
Well,
around
you
procurement.
can do what's called, which we've done before with mixed results, a preliminary expression of intent.
Well, that may be
You
what
do
it's
whatever
called,
you
yeah.
want with that, and then you
Right.
see what comes in,
Right.
and if you have something that obviously looks good, you then base an RFP on that.
Right.
Or not.
That was the original basis for the Kingsbury Club.
That's where I would go with it. Right now, I look at this and say, if I were a developer, I wouldn't touch this with a 10-foot pole. Town doesn't know what it wants to do. Town has a big, long list. In fact, the people that are next door appear to have a controlling interest over what actually goes in on that property. And then you want traffic studies, and you want to know peak usage. You want this full-blown analysis of what this thing's gonna look like when it's up and running. Find somebody else to pour all that money into that kind of an estimate, upfront plan. I'm not gonna do that. So I think we'd get even less response on something like this than we would if we just said we'd like a preliminary expression of intent or concept or something.
So an RFP is governed by state statute and regulation. So even though it may not make sense objectively,
Yeah.
it's been drafted, it has to be drafted in a certain way, there has to be certain criteria spelled out. Doesn't say what the particular criteria have to be. You've kind of alluded, there's 2 options. One is we have something in mind, how well can you satisfy that? The other is, we don't really have anything in mind, here's a piece of land, we'd like to develop it, make proposals. You can do it either way on an RFP, understanding that you're not bound to accept either one. You're not bound to go forward.
Okay, you don't have to award it.
The other issue here is we have this current MAPC, review of all the commercial property up on West Street, North Meadows, including, I think,
That
this
includes
area.
this as well.
I would be inclined to wait until we get the results of that study to hear what they think should be done, and then figure out how to move this thing forward.
That's what I was thinking when I was looking this over and I knew that that study was going on. Why wouldn't we wait to see what we might be lacking or what would be a good fit? Because it's a tricky, I was talking to you today, Christine, I know we still want to update the imagery, right? Because whoever is looking at this should see what that site really looks like today, and it looks nothing like that satellite shot at all. So
We have updated imagery, we don't have imagery that will show, what's been done on Hinkley South yet.
I could put my drone up there and take a snapshot. I could. I have a drone. I could just go up, take a snapshot, and
Chief's not here, right?
hey, it's one of those 2 and then ask for forgiveness later. But it gives a better concept, because then when you start looking at what can be done there, it's a really tricky area, right? Right now it doesn't look that tricky, but trust me, when you look at the 24 townhouses, the pickleball court, the paddleball court, all of the developments going on there, it now becomes, when you talk about a traffic study, there's a lot of traffic there right now. And it's good and it's bad, right? So to someone going in there who doesn't realize there's these residents that are moving in that are 62 and older, that there's all this youth activity with basketball courts and pickleball courts and paddle courts, that, you know, what could go in there? And I don't even know, I'll ask the question, you know, could Kingsbury say, we want that lot too, and we've got other ideas? So it's really, they could respond to this.
Anybody?
They
Yeah.
can
Anybody
respond.
can.
Okay.
And as far as the prohibited stuff, it's spelled out in the ground lease with Kingsbury. I don't know whether it was all taken and put in that RFP or not, but it definitely is a list that's in the Kingsbury ground lease.
If that's the actual list in the lease, I'm astonished that we put in the lease what we put in here when it has things like manicure and pedicure operations.
Oh, they had, I mean, they had a vision as to what they were gonna do.
It's gonna be a spa, and I remember actually, I think I have that original lease probably still in my office back in my Park and Rec days, because we were looking at what they were looking to do there and what we were gonna be looking to do at McCarthy Park, and I remember reading through the list, and I was like, whoa, this is pretty broad.
They had a very aggressive development plan initially, then it slowed down because it was like a catch-22 that revolved around the swimming pool, frankly.
Right.
So,
Yeah, I mean, I don't
everything got
categorically have a
slowed way
problem
down
with
for
Kingsbury wanting to expand, but I think as a town to be responsible,
To
we
flush out
have, we
ideas.
have to be able to make this realistically available for all ideas. And if the terms of the lease are so restrictive that Kingsbury has effective control over the decision that can be made here, if that's where we're at, then my thinking starts to shift a little bit, because this goes back to the point I made before. I would want, if that's the case, then I would wanna make sure that the town has taken a good hard look at whether or not we have any town purposes for that land.
100%.
That it's a pretty non-interfering place if we're using it for town purposes, so, before we, you know, if there's only one not buyer, but only one tenant who can effectively use this, I'm not gonna be very happy about that. But
So why don't we do this, let's hold until the results of the MAPC study.
Yep.
And in the meantime, we'll get you the original copy of the expression of interest that was done, excuse me, for Lot 3. And we'll also give you an updated copy, most recent copy of our lease, and then you can take a look at those before we move forward.
Okay.
Perfect.
You have a question there, sir?
Yes, ma'am.
Thought he was kidding, he's serious.
So a comment and a question. A comment is that I think it makes absolute sense to wait until after the result of the consultant about the IE property. And I had suggested that at some point, I know. And then the question is, this land was purchased for municipal purposes, including open space and public recreation.
No.
I don't know how.
No,
it was purchased for commercial land for development, all three of those lots.
it was an
For commercial
industrial
purposes,
subdivision
1995.
developed by George Vasili. He lost it to Ben Franklin, and the town stepped in and bought basically a 3-lot approved industrial subdivision
All
to
right.
preserve the land.
But, Pete,
That's
to
the
your
wrong idea then.
Yeah, so if it's, I think it's the 1995 town warrant report. The justification expressed to the taxpayers was we were buying it to have an inventory of commercial land. Now, that doesn't mean that 30 years later, we couldn't go back to the town and say, we would like you to, you know, we want to tell you that we think maybe there's a better thing to use for it. But that was the understanding when the town spent $750,000, I think, to buy that land, was as commercial, as basically an inventory of commercial.
Ironically, after we had tied up the bank on a purchase and sales agreement, I got a call from an attorney representing the developer, who wanted to know whether or not the town was going forward, because he had a developer who wanted to put a multi-hundred unit 40B in.
Yikes.
So here's the 1995 town report that you were just referencing. The warrant article 42 says, voted unanimously that the town appropriate the sum of $700,000 to acquire by purchase or eminent domain for municipal use, including recreation and open space parcels of land off West Mill.
So, well, I'll stand
There's
corrected.
there's a further article that authorizes the selectmen, to sell it for development.
Yeah, but, well, Pete, so I'm gonna stand corrected, because if you've got that there, I looked it up when Lot 3 was first, when Parks and Rec was asking, or where there were some parents that were asking if they could put a lacrosse field there, under, I think, Parks and Rec auspices. That's when I went to the library. I didn't see that document. I saw a different document, and it was just on the shelf. So my recollection of it being for commercial is not that document, but I'll stand corrected because you've got it. So I'll stand corrected on what I'll go back to the library.
I was fascinated. This is actually the library copy, but it's, when you search it online, that's what you come up with, is the copy from the library.
I'll have to go back and look, I'll have to go back and look again.
There's a different article authorizing the select board to, dispose of the property for development.
Well, that was subsequent. This thing was, because I was surprised to realize, I think it was like 2005 or something, that might have been later than that, 2010, I realized we'd been sitting on that property for 15 years. I was initially against using it as a cross field until I realized we'd been sitting on it for so long. And that's when I said, well, sure, I'm in favor. I called Mark Fisher and Richard Sorger, and maybe even you, Keith, as selectman, and said, I was on the warrant committee. And I basically, I was against this until I did the research and realized we bought this thing years ago, and it's like that old rusty tractor out behind the farmhouse. We're just sitting on it. And we're not a land acquisition company, so we shouldn't be, if we're buying it for a reason, we should be using it. And then have been there for so long. I personally changed my position about using it for a lacrosse field. It was before we bought the hospital, because the concern was that if Parks and Rec had that land, they wouldn't give it back. And I was saying, well, they will give it back, or else we won't give them any land in the hospital. So we can get that back. That one field we could get back if we need it. And here we are, 10, 15 years later, and it still isn't being used.
Pile of dirt.
Yeah. So anyway, but Pete, I stand corrected.
All right.
I'm just gonna go back to the library, since I can find what it was I saw.
Moving on to the next one.
Okay.
Okay, our next item is a vote to authorize the fire chief to sign the ambulance service pharmacy agreement with Beth Israel Deaconess Hospital, Needham, Inc.
This is annual request from the fire chief for our pharmacy and our controlled, we need to have it in place for our controlled substance license.
I don't have any questions, I'm fine with it.
Nope, ready to motion if
I
you want.
don't, I'm ready for a motion, go ahead.
All right, motion to authorize the fire chief to sign the ambulance service pharmacy agreement with Beth Israel Deaconess Hospital, Needham, Inc.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, 15th,
Hospital on a piece of paper.
What's that?
Didn't I see Norwood Hospital on a piece of paper somewhere at the very last
The
page?
agreement?
Yeah.
Well, thanks, Bill. I didn't dig into this one that way. Let's see. For the last page, you think?
Yeah. It's possible I'm mistaken, but I'm pretty sure I saw it.
Does it reference Norwood Hospital being out of service, because that's our usual?
No, but no, it just,
List of hospitals with which ambulance services has affiliated agreements, Norwood Hospital, Appendix A.
doesn't change your motion, but I mean,
Right.
I'll ask the chief.
that's why I didn't raise it before you voted.
I'm doing a word search for Norwood, and I don't see Norwood Hospital mentioned.
No, right here.
What?
It's right here. It's page technically 8 of that,
Oh,
of the
right.
agreement. It's just Appendix A, list of all hospitals with which
Oh,
ambulance
okay.
services has affiliated agreements.
Item number 15 is a vote to approve an extension of the time request for the Downtown Improvement Grant through MassDOT Shared Streets and Places to December 31, 2024.
This was a grant the town received for $145,000 for pedestrian safety improvements. Given the transition between Nick, Sarah, and then Maria, we just need a one-year extension for the work. And I have to tell you that Brittany and I went on a field trip last week to visit our new businesses on Park Street, and we were almost run over twice on the way back.
That's nice.
So I am very interested in expediting the pedestrian safety equipment people are running the light out here between Starbucks and the library.
Oh,
And so if they block the box, which everybody knows drives me crazy, and then there were not just us in the crosswalk, because it could just be personal, but it wasn't just Brittany and I in the crosswalk. There were there were other people in the crosswalk, and the cars continued to drive around us.
You know what I don't understand that crosswalk is and I've watched this, and it leads to why people start to move. It's white, so you can go, right? And then suddenly it starts flashing slow. So it's not, it's not consistent. Like if you're in New York City, you get certain countdowns, so you know you're not supposed to go. If there's any way to update those LED communication boxes.
I'll ask the chief. This was just clearly they had run the red light and got stuck in the intersection.
Oh,
and then,
we have
this
bad
was-
gridlock right at South Street and Brothers and right there at the center of town. Like, just even coming here tonight,
right.
I pulled out legally, but because I've done it enough times, I cut behind another truck so that when the light went green on 109, because I never moved for an entire light cycle. Like, that's wrong.
The other thing is that I've noticed is you're coming south out of North Street into Main Street.
Yeah.
You can, the sign says right there, you can make a right-hand turn after the stop, but you may not catch the pedestrian lights. if you're not paying attention.
Right. The pedestrian lights are horrible.
So we all agree we really need this grant money.
Yes,
So I would
okay,
like an
we just-
extension.
Ringo. All right.
Just
Are we good?
this is
Yeah.
this is a reference back to your goals. One of your goals, we'll talk about it tomorrow, but I think one of your goals had to do with the wayfinding
Yes,
signs. Is that tied into
this is different.
This is different.
This is different than that, yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
You ready for a motion?
We are.
All right, motion to approve an extension of time request for the downtown improvement grant through MassDOT Shared Street and Places to December 31st, 2024.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Number 16, vote to assign a letter to support and call for the advancement of H 3852, an act supporting electrical load aggregation programs in the Commonwealth.
So Bob Winograd had first forwarded this to me because I'm on the Community Choice Aggregation Committee. And last week, between the Select Board meeting, the Norfolk County Advisory Board meeting, and a week's worth of client obligations, I never had the time to go back through the presentation that you saw that Patrick had, from Good Energy, had developed. So the issue is that for all the state's intentions of promoting this community choice aggregation to get higher levels of renewable energy, the DPU is taking incredibly long amounts of time to approve the plans that each community has to submit. Those plans are like 95% consistent with one another. So the DPU's already approved several plans that certain towns have, but for whatever reason, by their procedures, they take a long time to approve a nearly identical plan from a new community. In our experience, we first submitted our plan a year ago, or even maybe a little more than a year ago. It was held back a little bit because Patrick said DPU is already starting to change some of their requirements. So rather than have us put the old plan in and then get it kicked back and have to do it again, we deferred putting it in for like a month or two, as I recall, to further modify the plan to get out in front of the requirements that DPU was changing. That's the plan that went in, and it's been in there for a year. And we shouldn't feel bad, because there are some towns that have been waiting 4 years to get the approval. So this letter is basically making a plea to the legislature to sit there and get the DPU to change the rules so that the DPU doesn't have to do as much administratively detailed stuff as they currently think they have to in order to approve these plans that are nearly identical. And so I would speak in favor of this letter.
Okay. So if I recall this, I actually just came on board, I think, when we were approving this. This is just so
Sounds
that we
right.
can buy electricity at
Yeah,
low rates.
oh, yeah, just so you know, that this community choice aggregation was a program put in place that would allow communities to pull together electric users. The only ones that get pulled into this are the ones that are getting Eversource basic service. So if you have any if you've worked out any separate supplier agreement, that doesn't get changed. In our program, what we did was we have a baseline, which the expectation would be that that baseline would have higher renewable than the current standard that Eversource has to meet, but would be structured in a way that we would be able to get a better rate than what the basic service for Eversource is. It's a little tricky because you sign a 3-year contract for community choice, and Eversource changes their rates every 6 months. So you don't know for sure that your rate will be lower than Eversource Basic all the time. What so far has happened is that towns that have this program have been able to deliver cheaper electricity for those who pick at least the base, and it's an opt-out program, so you wind up getting pulled into it unless you actively jump out of it. There's then 2 other options. One, if anybody wants 100% renewable, it's gonna cost you more, but you can basically, through the program, get a hold of 100% renewable. And what we did, because initially we were trying to set levels of renewables, and then what we decided was, given that the state keeps increasing the base level of renewables that Eversource has to be at, we basically said that midpoint alternative is 50% of the way between where the Eversource the state requirement for Eversource is and 100%. So that 50% would continue to move as the Eversource rate goes higher. Penny Connor, I think at her last the Energy Committee meeting, made a comment that Eversource, I don't know if this is going to be true or not, but she was basically saying Eversource is going to be completely renewable by 2035. So as the DPU is taking so long, the window where this matters, we're down to about 12 years that this even matters.
Wow.
So, assuming Eversource achieves 100% renewable by 2035.
Good to
So-
go?
So, Bob Renegard is in favor of this?
Yeah.
Okay, all right. Yep, go ahead.
All right, motion to vote to sign a letter to support and call for the advancement of H3852 and act supporting electrical load aggregation programs in the Commonwealth.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Number 17, vote on Zula Gallery request for one-day liquor licenses for the following dates. Friday, September 22 from 6 to 11:30. Thursday, October 5 from 6 to 11:30. They're all 6 to 11:30. The other ones are Thursday, November 2 and Thursday, December 7.
I didn't think anybody in Medfield drank after 9 o'clock.
Well, you
Just
have
looking
to,
at Nosh and Grog, place cleared out every time around about 9:15.
They could stay open later. I asked this question too.
They can.
But they choose not to.
They choose not to.
Okay.
we used,
I'm
we used
looking
we
forward
used
to
give
Zulo
people,
kind of firing up this town just a little bit.
do we know what's
All
gonna
right.
happen next door here yet?
Not yet.
All right, so should I motion? Are we good to go?
Yes.
Approve the Zula Gallery request for a one-day liquor license for the following dates, Friday, September 22nd. All the times are the same as you said, 6 to 11:30 p.m. So Thursday, October 5th, Thursday, November 2nd, and Thursday, December 7th.
Go get him, Bill. Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, aye.
Aye.
Number 18, Church of the Advent, one-day liquor license for Friday, October 13, from 6:30 to 9:30 for a murder mystery dinner for fellowship and fundraising.
Ooh, Friday the 13th, they're having it. Ooh.
It's a church, so I guess the 9:30 is okay.
See, they're gonna wrap up early. So a motion to approve the request from Church of the Advent for a one-day liquor license for Friday, October 13th, from 6:30 to 9:30 p.m. for a murder mystery dinner for the fellowship and fundraising.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Citizen comment, I don't think anybody signed up that I'm aware of, so we'll go to consent agenda, and I'll just read them all. Request from Charles Intravea for a block party permit, hope I pronounced that right, Charles, for between 27 and 31 Kenny Road on September 30 from 2 to 5. Number 20, request from Leah Creed for a block party permit between Emerson and Tamarack Streets on September 23 from 4 to 8 p.m. Number 21, request from Leslie Day for a block party permit on Hatters Hill Road from Vinebrook to the top of Hatters Hill on September 23 from 4:30 to 8:30, and that's it.
All right, motion to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And we have meeting minutes, and I'm afraid I haven't had a chance to look at them yet. Town administrator updates?
So I have a couple of things. As we mentioned, just briefly, we had a visit today with Trinity and with Secretary Ed Augustus, who was named in May as the Secretary of the Executive Office of Housing and Livable Communities. Much of our delegation was there. We did a tour, and then had a very nice reception at the chapel to talk about the project and where we're going and next steps for funding. It was incredibly nice to see such a large turnout and really nice weather. After this summer, I was really, really hoping for a sunny day today, so that worked out well. The only other thing I have is, I have two things. Reminder, Medfield Day is Saturday. And then we have booked the Zulo Gallery for October 19th at 7 p.m. for our board and committee appreciation night. And we will have information that will follow. Brittany will handle communication to all of the chairs, making sure our current board and committee members are invited. We would also like to extend that invitation to anybody who's interested in joining a committee to come in and speak to those members that evening to learn more about that. And Marion Bonaldi will do a very short training session and introduce our new board and committee handbook as well.
7 p.m. July.
What time are we? I think we're 11:30. I think we're just having cookies for the record.
All right.
All right, we've got if you look at the agenda, there's Chris has the meeting dates going out through May, through the annual town meeting. Selectmen reports, Mr. Murphy.
It's only been a week, so I've only managed to get in two pieces of mischief here. The Norfolk County Advisory Board held their meeting on Wednesday night, so the day after we met. It was a pretty reasonably straightforward. Mostly it was budget adjustments that they make. It's sort of almost like the end of fiscal year type stuff, but it's reallocating money. I'm still trying to figure out their budget management process at the county level, because there's a lot of these adjustments that occur over the course of the year. And then on Saturday, I attended Christine didn't bring it up, she was there too, but I attended the funeral service for Margaret Warren. I don't believe I ever met Margaret Warren. She was 87 years old when she passed away. I've been here, maybe you know more than I do, Pete, but there's people in this town. I've been here since '95, and I still learn about people in this town that were longstanding employees, that not only were longstanding employees, but continued to work for the town into their 70s and 80s. A few of them, like Ralph Parmesan, I had the pleasure to meet before he ever passed away, when he was still running the Conservation Commission. But there's some real treasures that have lived in this town that maybe you know, Miley, because you grew up here. But there are some wonderful people in this town. In Warren's case, I never met her, but I went to the funeral and met her family, and it's just one of the things I think that makes Medfield a special town. And it's amazing to me how many people, I've been here as long as I have, and I still somehow or other don't know about them until, in some cases it's too late, in some cases it's well along that I find out about them. So she seemed to be one of them.
Nice. She's a tremendous woman, and we are going to miss her greatly at the town hall.
Thank you
and
both for going.
Margaret stopped working for us just about 6 weeks ago, so she was working up till the very end. So it's definitely a huge loss for us here.
Eileen?
All right, so I've done a few things in the past week. Monday, I sat in the MMA Grants 101, just having, sitting in the Affordable Housing Trust meetings, and we talk about various fundings. I saw that come across as an invite, and I was like, oh, I might as well learn a little bit more about how we go about grants, because I know how much time it takes, and the bodies that we'd love to have to get involved in. There was a survey taken during the webinar, and unanimously, that was the number one thing, that towns, it's the time, it's the shortage of bodies, because they asked people, how were they familiar with the process, where did they go to the state, did they go to municipal, did they go to private funds, just some really interesting questions, and as you guys know, it's always online, so you can see the questions and the answers. They also talked about how you can go to many states and towns share their grant process. So she happened to mention, like St. Petersburg, Florida, she's like, they've done a really good job sharing. So you don't have to go and reinvent the wheel. And the same with, I think it was Boulder, Colorado. I too participated in the walk with Secretary Augustus this afternoon. Good turnout. It was good to see, Jim Keefe, the CEO of Trinity, Abby, Amanda, the whole team, their whole team. And the fact that Mo and Maria and Chief Clerico, they're just the people that are going to be key moving forward as that becomes a developed site. So, and Pete, you made it. I know Gus, you booked.
Yeah, Chris and Frank and Brittany were there,
The whole
so.
team. Oh, yeah.
I think the most exciting part about that is when we bring somebody to the site who's never seen it before.
Mm-hmm.
And they may have read about it and they may have known about it, but till you actually walk that property, can you really understand the vision of what we're looking to do?
And as long as it has been unused, it doesn't look bad. It looks pretty good.
It looks very nice right now.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, the chapel was great.
Yeah, oh, the brickwork on that chapel is just remarkable.
And then I'm just gonna put a little public reminder, and I see Jill out there, that tomorrow night is the Dog Control Bylaw Committee Forum, and I highly, highly recommend those that have a dog, that don't have a dog, they wanna come and listen to the conversation. As I said last week, I'm not gonna steal their thunder. I think they've done a really good job. There should be a really good dialogue tomorrow night, and then that will come back to the select board, and we can decide how we move forward for the warrant for 2024. And then, just a reminder, I did see Senator Rouse this morning. She is hosting, for any citizens that are interested, on Monday, October 2nd. It's called the Town Hall Northern Region. She's hosting it at the Needham Town Hall, so certainly that is open to anyone in the public. If I look at her email real quick, she, as much as she would love to host it here in Medfield, it's not possible with all the towns. So she's I can see on the email she had Dover representatives, Needham representatives, our whole team, in Sherburne. So just an FYI.
And she's inviting the Medfield people to come to that October 2nd one in Needham.
Yes, that's the one she's recommending. And she said, I think the doors open, if I go back to her note here, doors open at, it starts at 6, I want to say they're opening the doors at 5:45, yes. And then I also will attend the Concom meeting on Thursday night. So that is all I got.
I went to the Energy Committee in the past week and submitted comments to the Dog Control Bylaw Committee and had a random conversation with the facilities person from the May Institute, because I know they run a lot of group homes, and I was explaining to him that we've been trying to develop group homes in Medfield. And that's it for me. Anything else?
Just on a side note, regarding group homes, I did actually get a chance, Christine, to talk to both Jim today and Abby, and they were fantastic. Jim's like, hadn't heard it. I said, you know what, might not have made your level yet. Abby said, we're gonna explore. We're still, if you're gonna go from scale of 1 to 10, we're at a 2. When we get closer to 7, 8, 9, and we have a layout, because she said that the kicker's gonna be the historic tax credits. There's only so many things they can do. Like, if we wanted 3 rooms together, they might not allow that. But she said, absolutely, we're not giving you a stiff arm, so it was good. Okay. All right, motion to adjourn?
Just one quick thing, just so I can explain what the bunny boxes are. So
Oh,
I'm sure
yeah.
you're all wondering. So this was actually a grant that Kathy Vandenboom, who's HR for both the town and the schools, she applied for and received a wellness grant from the insurance company. So these boxes were given to all town and school employees, and they were wellness for the new year, and they have snacks and an exercise ball and some other exercise equipment. And just a thank you from Dr. Marsden and I to all of our employees for all the great work that they do, and they might need that after meeting with us.
It's quite a great bag. Thank you, Kathy.
Yeah, so, anyway, thank you to Kathy for doing that. Everybody loved all of our healthy snacks, but they're pretty good.
Check this out. If you're really very quiet, you can hear the greatness inside you.
Very cool.
All right, fabulous. All right, motion to adjourn.
All in favor of adjournment? Aye.
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 Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This is